Welcome back to the Real Estate 401k Show. I'm your host, Mike Weinstein, alongside Justin Frederick and, of course, Ryan Gerdes in the house. We have a very special guest today, Michael Simpson with Desert Foundation Forensic Engineering. Not 100% sure what that is, Ryan.
Yeah,
That's a big word for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things that makes all of what we do happen, but no one gets to really see it. It's kind of the underbelly of the real estate industry, because nothing happens until you have a permit, and you can't get a permit on anything until you've gone through some pretty extensive engineering stuff. And so Mike is a good buddy of mine, and we met through a mutual friend of ours, many years ago. And it's funny. I always thought like engineering might be the most boring damn thing to ever like listen to, and then once you kind of like start getting into it, you're like, holy shit, there's a lot of really interesting elements of this, and as to why it plays such an important role, because it seemed to me that like whenever we were doing like ground up stuff, or there was like any permits to be done, it was just like, we have to wait on engineering.
Yeah.
These guys are always the naysayer of what we're trying to do here. And then you start listening to is why these things could be issues, and you're like, okay, there's a reason why.
It's valid.
There's the guy's above my pay grade on that, right? So Mike Simpson, obviously I want you to be able to tell us a little bit about your background and whatnot, but I'm going to brag a little bit for you.
Sure.
This guy's one of the most competent and intelligent engineers that I've ever met.
Then why are you hanging out with Ryan then, Mike?
Yeah, right.
Not that smart.
But his background with a lot of the PA stuff, particularly with work with FEMA and the different work that you've done with a number of different companies, is quite impressive. Your resume speaks for itself on that front. And now you're doing a lot of work not only with ADOT, but you've started up your own company in a field that is very, very high demand. I can't tell you how many times we've walked into homes and seen, some significant settlement issues, or I mean, it seems like we are always good for at least one or two trusses that are cracked or whatever,
all the time,
and ceiling, in the roof. I mean, there's always something over there, and that's really where you shine. So that being said, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got started and how you found your way into this crazy business?
Well, sure. So I've been in engineering in Arizona for over 30 years. I went to Arizona State and got my MBA and my degree in civil engineering from Arizona State. Out of college, you have to work for 4 years before you can take your PE exam. So I worked for several geotechnical engineering firms here in Arizona, and then I started a company called United Civil Group, which I owned and ran for about a decade, and then sold it. Around that same time, I went to go chase disaster work for FEMA as a subject matter expert, and doing what we call forensic engineering, like looking at, in the case of FEMA, looking at damages and saying, hey, are those damages related to the storm, or were they pre-existing, things like that. So I did that. I worked on Katrina for 10 years, and then in New Orleans, and then I went out to Puerto Rico and worked on Maria and the earthquakes.
Dang.
Finished up working directly for FEMA for the last 3 years, doing like all the major stuff that you hear about in Maria, working for the, first I started with the schools, and believe it or not, Puerto Rico has the third largest school district in the country, 1,110 schools. And then on top of that, we had University of Puerto Rico, which had over 12 campuses and 800 buildings. So there was a lot of stuff to look at. And then ultimately, I was in charge of the power, electric, water, sewer, roads. And then in 2021, came home for COVID, like everybody, and decided I've had enough of that island. And so, but the whole time I've been also working for a local foundation company doing residential stuff. So they would send me, reports and have me review them and have me do permits for them, things like that. And so I thought, well, I'll just work for them part time, and I just felt like that would be enough. And then, sure enough, when I settled into that, the owner sold the company, and the new buyers.
Always the way, right?
Yeah, and some we might get into on this is, with the foundation companies, it's really gone from mom and pop shops to giant industry, and so it was more sales oriented and less, hey, we're trying to fix your situation here. So I quit, and I had to get neck surgery, so I hung out while I did that, and then I took a job as a geotechnical engineer and forensic engineer for ADOT. And so I'm still doing that. I go out, look at bridges and design roads and do all these types of things for them. And while I was doing that, an engineer that used to work with me at the foundation company and other places, and the guy I was working with now, currently an engineer, they were harassing me like, why don't, these homeowners, they need help. They need somebody on their side to look at the foundation issues. And so we went ahead and started Desert Foundation Forensic Engineering. And we're keeping it very simple. You call us out, we come look at the problem. If we can handle it, then we handle it. And if it's, let's say, so again, I'm a geotechnical engineer. And so most of these problems that we end up looking at are soil related or foundation related. So that's right in our wheelhouse. But let's say something was a truss related item, or like you were discussing or something, then we would refer them to a structural engineer, just like a structural would refer them to a geotech for something.
Well, that was going to be my first question was like who's calling you? So we've established foundations, but give me a situation and a problem maybe outside of a foundation where you would be called.
So what'll typically happen is a inspector will go look at it, in a transactional situation and say, hey, I see something that I think is a foundation problem, and then they call us out. And in a couple of those cases, we've probably saved because the other side of that is the owner then goes, hey, I'll call this company. They're offering free inspections, and the free inspection sounds great, except they're going to try and sell you something, and they're going to give you a list of things that need to be done. And then now you got this kind of transactional problem because is that a disclosure issue? Because do they need a foundation repair? Do they need piers or not? So there's been right out of the gate, we've saved 2 customers I can attest to that where they had been told they needed piers and they in fact didn't. And so it saved each of them about $40,000 a piece.
And that's such bullshit, man, because I can't tell you like that's the scariest thing for a potential homeowner to run into is structural issues. If they see that the AC is going bad, that's a bummer, it's a big ticket item, but we can just replace the AC that's over there. Structural stuff seems like one of the most daunting elements that a potential risk could be on a property. And so these engineering companies just go over there and they say, hey, look, we feel like we could probably soak $40,000-$50,000 out of this person on some trumped up engineering report, just because we can scare the hell out of them, right?
Yeah, I won't go that extreme, but it's not usually the engineering company; it's the contractor.
Well, okay,
yeah,
right,
but
fair.
But what I would say is they're driving it forward because they're going to make a sale. They used to send out the contractor would come out himself, write up a bid. Now they're sending sales reps, and the sales reps might do measurements, but those measurements, and I talk about this on my blog and stuff, is they don't really necessarily mean anything because there was a study put out by ASU in the early 2000s that measured the flatness of residential slabs here in Arizona, and on average, they were off by a ½ inch of flatness, and they typically were as high as on the order of an inch. Okay, so if you go out and you measure the flatness, it may be moving, it may not be. It depends on a variety of things. So related to is it damaged or not, or so on and so forth. So when these sales guys come out and they measure and they go, oh, your house is unlevel, it's kind of could be true. I mean, they might need something, but in a lot of cases they don't.
We are in studio with Mike Simpson from Desert Foundation Forensic Engineering. If you'd like some more information on how to reach him, go ahead and text the word foundation to 623-AZ-RECON. That's foundation to 623-AZ-RECON, or just mention the word foundation in the comments section. So as a homeowner, and or a buyer. It's not uncommon to see some cracks in the tile, or some cracks, in the stem wall, drywall in the stem wall, and so forth. What am I looking for? Like, when is it just okay? Yeah, normal settling cracks, as opposed to, hey, this could be an issue.
So for obvious one would be if your doors and windows are jamming when you're trying to close them and open them. The other thing is, if it's a newer home, so settlement happens, if you're in like a clay soil, or soil with a lot of fines in it, you'll have the initial settlement that happens during construction. Then you'll have an immediate settlement, or you have immediate during construction. You have initial settlement, which can take several weeks to maybe a year. And then if for really fine grained soils like clays, it might go on for decades. So, and then the other thing is the foundation companies that are offering repairs don't address is also those clay soils can be expansive. So if you have a conventional slab or even a PT slab, a post-tension slab, you can get water into it, and the tight soil, if it's tight clay, it'll want to expand, it'll swell. And so you have to define whether that movement's going up or down. As to what the repair is going to be. Because if it's an expansive soil, then you really got to get the water. You got to keep the water constant, not necessarily dry. Or in Arizona, you want to keep it dry because we're dry, right? But the main thing is you keep it constant, then the volume doesn't change, right? Putting piers on that doesn't do anything.
You've mentioned that a couple times. What are piers?
Piers are like just like it sounds like you. So you have your conventional spread footing along the wall, the perimeter wall. They come in, so if that's settled and you needed to lift it back up or stop it from moving,
gotcha.
You can drill piers or you can push piers into the ground and then kind of lift the house up from those.
So with like a PT slab, what's
same thing? You can go to the perimeter because they have the turn downs at the perimeter, and you can put piers on those. But the problem is at the middle, like sometimes you get water migrating to the middle of the slab. And then it's going to be pushing non-bearing walls around, and particularly like areas like Gilbert have a lot of clays, so you'll get heave, So, and that heave, it has nothing to do with what's happening at the perimeter other than water's getting in there. So, a lot of times, what I'll recommend to people is, hey, rather than if you've got time, then let's fix the water issue. Let's put gutters on the house. Let's move all your lush landscaping away. Let's re-landscape. Let's at least re-slope so that the water's being pushed away from the foundation, and then let it all stabilize. And so, kind of come back to what we're offering. We do what's called a level A evaluation. So if that'd be just me coming out, looking at your situation, and then if I feel like there's not really any, like, here's some recommendations or this, in some cases, maybe it's you have a rebar that just needs to be chipped out and replaced, things like that. I'll write that in that report. If it's something where I'm like, okay, this house seems to be moving, first of all, we have to establish whether it's moving. And the only real way to do that is through a level survey where we come out with either a manometer or a zip level. Basically,
I got one of those in my glove compartment.
Yeah, exactly.
I never know when I'm going to need it.
Yeah.
He doesn't even know what a level
Picked
is.
one up at Home Depot last week. No,
Right.
Does Amazon sell those?
I think I got one in my back pocket. So go out and we measure it, and then ideally come back 6 months to a year later and then remeasure it to see how it's moved. Okay, and then if it's not moving, then great, your house it's not moving, good to go, right? But if it is moving, then you start to look at, okay, can we control it through moisture and cheaper means? And then if not, then you go to the more stout means, like putting piers on it.
Ryan and I were helping a buyer buy a house, and it was in Levine, and it was just, every home inspection is like, hey, we recommend further evaluation, but there was a lot of cracking in the stem wall, and so I called Anthony with HCP. I'm like, dude, what do you really think about this? He goes, yeah, you need to have somebody come out, because all the I don't know the proper terminology for this, but the caps at the end of all the rods, because it was a post-tension slab, all showed evidence of rust.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was a big problem. So we had someone come out, give an estimate. I think it was like $45,000 because they were going to have to maybe replace all the
wow.
rods.
Yeah.
And so we went back to the seller, and the seller was very amicable and just offered $1,500. So we walked.
Yeah, it's funny because post-tension slabs are their own interesting case. So sometimes you'll have a cable break. And there's certain companies that will recommend to come
And those
out.
are fun videos. So if our
yeah.
listeners want to see something fun, just
YouTube,
search post-tension cables breaking or snapping.
It's like a gunshot going off in the house. It's loud and you're aware. Yeah. So yeah, there's companies we'll recommend or refer them to for those kinds of repairs. A lot of times with a conventional slab, and we had a couple of these in the last few weeks where same thing, inspector wasn't sure what was going on with the stem wall, and so we went out, looked at it, and in a conventional slab stem wall, you have the rebar, and through watering or just being there long enough, the rebar eventually will rust, and as it rusts, it swells and it cracks the stem wall, and so it looks horrible, but it's actually a relatively in all reality a relatively inexpensive repair because they just have to come out, chip it out, clean up the rebar, some cases replace the rebar, and then put it back together. And that usually runs about $100 a foot to do that. So it's not as bad.
All right, we are in studio with Michael Simpson from Desert Foundation Forensic Engineering. If you think you might have some issues with your foundation, or if you're buying a home and you get the inspection report and it does recommend further evaluation, we want to make sure that you can get a hold of Mike. All you got to do is text the word foundation to 623-AZ-RECON. That's foundation to 623-AZ-RECON. And just to clarify, Justin is not in a timeout. So if you want to, if you
I'm listening. I'm soaking this all up. I was thinking about my property. I had to bring in truckloads of dirt to replace the clay that I had in order to set my house on.
Right.
And then I remember when I bought the lot, I was like, okay, this is gonna be great. It's gonna be a nice flat lot. It's gonna be perfect. This is where I'm gonna set my house. This is where I'm gonna put my horses. And then civil engineer comes in, shows me a piece. I'm like, great, looks great. It's gonna be flat, right? No. And so we had it graded, and man, I couldn't believe, because I have flood irrigation too, along with the expansive soil. So I mean, really boosted my house up. I had to bring in 20 loads of truck or dirt to replace the dirt we were setting the house on. They wanted me to have a floating foundation. So it was very extensive compared to what I was expecting, and I didn't understand any of it until we got into the questions. And it was interesting.
Did you have to do PT on yours?
No.
So I don't know how much more time we have left on this, but I have a question for you. It seems like all the new home builders are using PT on pretty much everything, and then all the custom is doing conventional slab, and they'll be right next door to some of these massive developments. What gives on that? I still haven't really figured out
what's better.
When do I use it? When do I not? Which one's better?
I don't want to speak for the developers, but PT really became a thing in Arizona in the 90s. And as they refined it, they were able to get it thinner, and meaning thinner sections, less concrete. And I think what the developers found is that they get economies of scale through mass production, and so they went to a lot more of the PT slabs. You can have conventional or PT on any of these soil types, generally speaking. In the case of yours, they said, hey, bring a bunch of import in to protect you from the clay. You probably would still have to do that for a PT. But generally speaking, I think to answer your question, the developers found that they get economies of scale out of it.
So it's just more economical for them.
Saving on concrete and things like that.
All right, in wrapping up, last question. What's the craziest thing that you've seen, or one of the craziest things that you've seen? You showed up to a property and you're like, holy crap, this is bad. And I'm sure you saw some crazy things in Katrina and things like that. But I'm just talking about you're going on a foundation inspection.
Arizona. There's a few things. One is to bring it back to what you were talking about. Out in Litchfield Park, there's deep clays out there that you don't see right in the surface. So you get out there and you're like, oh, well, there's not clays here. We're good. But what's causing this house to move? It's really moving around, And then we went out and drilled, and there were these deep fat, we call fat clays, because they want water and they just soak it up and then they really swell. And so, if it's clay right under the foundation, you can control the moisture through a variety of means, and then you can also, in worst case, like what we did with some PTs, we actually put the PTs on piers, lifted it up, and then created voids underneath the slab so that the clays could have room to swell. But with those deep clays, we didn't have that choice. So it was really a matter of like, you got to control water, and I just last touch on all this. So the biggest question I get, and I've got some weirder events too, but like I think it's important for people to know this. The question I always get is, well, is my house safe? And the answer is almost 99% of the time, with the cracks and everything, the house is totally safe. It's a serviceability issue. How many times do you want to replace that tile because it's cracking because of the movement, things like that. So the houses are safe. It's a serviceability issue. You're going to have to fix more things. You're going to have to patch more. You're going to have to do things like that until you can get it under control.
All right, Ryan. This was a good one.
Yeah.
Good job, buddy.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. I hang around with some smart people. No big deal.
All right, this is Mike Simpson with Desert Foundation Forensic Engineering. If you'd like some more information on how you can reach him, if you want someone to come out and give you a real, honest assessment of your foundation and the issues that your house might be facing, all you got to do is text the word foundation to 623-AZ-RECON. That's foundation to 623-AZ-RECON, or just type the word foundation in the comments section.